our weekly bedtime story, A Moostache. Alright guys, here we go. A Moostache by Margie Palatini. Moose had a problem, a horrible, hairy, prickly problem. It grew right below his nostrils and just above his upper lip. A moustache. Now, not a few spare hairs or shy little stubble, no mere weak wandering whiskers on the upper lip of this moose. No sirree! Moose had a big, bushy, bristly, mighty moustache. But a moustache that was burly, surly, mangy mess, and it itched a lot. Sure, he plucked and he tweezed, he even clipped, snipped, and teased, but his combs were still cowards and his brushes rebelled. His scissors simply surrendered, waving the white flag. Moose was a frizzy tizzy. The moustache was completely crimping his style. He was a great hoofer, but he could barely bop and hip-hop with a moustache going flip-flop. He was a wonderful chef, but he simply could not flimble and shuffle with all of those whiskers in his way. And he was a daring skier, but how could he downhill race with a mighty moustache blowing in his face? Moose had to do something, and soon. But what? After days and days of much serious thought, Moose got an idea. He crossed some hair here and he crossed some hair there, and he tied his moustache around his neck. A moose scarf seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. But then his moustache got knotted and mangled and horribly tangled, and those hundreds of hairs still prickled and trickled. Worse, Moose could barely take a breath with all of that moustache wrapped around his neck. So Moose untied, unwrapped, unknotted, and gulped in some fresh air. He got another idea. He parted some hair this way, he parted some hair that way, and he heaped all that moustache on top of his head. Moostache antlers seemed to be ideal answers to his problem. It was simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect, until a squadron of squirrels and one very nosy gopher moved right into the Moose Motel. They huddled and hoarded, furrowed in, and burrowed out. Needless to say, it became quite crowded up there on the moose's head, and heavy, and messy, and very, very noisy. The squirrely chitting and chatting, squeals and squawks woke Moose every morning before the crack of dawn, and that gopher was giving the moose one hairy headache. Moose needed his sleep. He needed his rest. He needed his privacy. Moustachioid antlers, nuts, said Moose. So he unparted and unpiled, untwisted, untwined, and said adios to the hairy horns. But now what? What? The miserable moose took hold of the hunk of hair and he wrestled it. Then he roped it. He tethered it. He tied, tamed. Aha! A moustelle! Now, that was so simple. That was so easy. That was not so perfectly perfect. Talk about a dizzy-do. Moose didn't know if he was coming or going, backward, forward, this way, that. He didn't know which end was which. Moose had to bail on the tail. And so he thought and thought and thought some more, but no other idea was a worthy winner. Braids were a bother, a moustache sweater? Too sweltering. A net? Not. Poor Moose. His problem was truly terrible, unbearable, just downright sad. He felt so bad, he didn't know what else to do. Then, call it fate, call it destiny. It was probably dumb luck, but one day Moose tripped on his moustache and just had no time to duck. Oof! Pardon me, they both said as they bumped. They blinked, and they stared, and their hearts went thump-a-thump. She was a moose with a bouffant so bodacious, outrageously wow. It was just plain old big. Hair after hair piled higher than high. A skyscaping dew of glorious curls, a towering of swirling twists and twirls. She was simply splendid, stupendous, absolutely superb. Of course, Moose had to ask how she did that with such great dew. Mrs. Moose winked and then whispered, "Just a little glue." So she helped me fearlessly plunge a hoof into a fat pot of the white gooey goop, and carefully, oh so carefully, they globbed, and they plobbed, they pasted and they pressed, they coaxed and curled every truly unruly, wayward whisker. Around and around they tweaked and twirled those horrible hairs until Moose's once mangy mess was now a wondrous winding wave of marvelous moustache. Moose gazed into the mirror and smiled a broad moosey smile. He was so happy, so glad, just giddy with glee. He looked dashing and handsome. Moose gushed, "Is this really me?" With not a care for one hair, the moose pair boogied and bopped. They skied downhill, even uphill, and their cooking was hot, hot, hot. So of course it wasn't long after that Moose and his moustache and his beautiful bride foxtrotted and tangoed and walked down the aisle. Good hair days, bad hair days, they vowed to love and to cherish, and with hearts heaped with love and pots filled with goop, they both sighed, "I do," glue, and promised to never part. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect, and it stuck. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed Moostache, and I hope you have a great night's sleep. Good night!